Welcome back, trainers, to the 2026 Houston Regional Championships. We have two trainers about to take the stage that are new faces. I cannot wait to get into these battles. What do you think of my segment, Alex? Did you like that? Can you lift it? What do you say?
Yes, we can.
All right, well said. Alex, I'm really excited to get into this. I think that we have some other good segments planned for the weekend, so make sure to stay tuned for all of those. But we're setting the stage for a very interesting battle. We've seen a lot of Pokemon that I didn't expect. For example, Galarian Weezing really stands out to me. Are there any Pokemon that you're kind of surprised by so far?
Yeah, I would say the lack of any Scizor and Kanto Marowak. Right? I mean, we talked about it, that they may not be as common as last time.
Yeah.
But just to see none is kind of crazy to me.
What's standing out to me is that, and you actually mentioned this backstage, a lot of teams are lacking a direct answer to Quagsire because there is no grass coverage.
Right.
So I think that that's going to be a recurring theme, and finding creative ways to get around Quagsire is going to be a defining part of this meta. Do you use a dragon type like a Guzzlord or an Altaria, or do you use another neutral matchup? Maybe a normal type Pokemon like Licky Licky. You have to know those matchups inside and out, because I think Quagsire is going to be all over Houston this weekend.
Yeah, I agree, and I think a lot of people are playing Wigglytuff as well. Yeah. I think it is the #1 most used Pokemon this weekend, so navigating those two is kind of really tough because they cover each other so well, right? Fairy and water and ground, very good coverage. But here we actually see Xmot on your left versus GoLeagueGregg on the right. Is there anything interesting that you see on these teams, Speedy?
Well, that's a great question, but let's take a look first at GoLeagueGregg's team. Gotta mention the Clefable, right? Clefable is such a core breaker. Can run Meteor Mash, Moonblast, Psychic. It's got a whole litany of charge attacks, but it looks like this particular Clefable will be running Meteor Mash and Moonblast with Fairy Wind as a fast attack. And whenever I see an Islip, I gotta ask the question, is it counter or is it low kick?
Yeah, I think in this situation specifically, it is low kick. So those Rage Fists and close combats are going to be very, very quick to charge and hitting incredibly hard.
I do think that does change the gameplay and the pacing quite a bit for the Annihilate. Will we see it here in this first matchup? There are a couple targets on the opposing trainer's team. I think mainly that Empoleon is what they're looking out for, but neutrally, I mean, I don't think the Annihilate is that bad into Fortress either.
Yeah, I think it does really well into the steel typings, but I think because of the Galarian Corsola and the Wigglytuff, it's going to be really tough to try to bring that Annihilate in. However, we see another Pokemon that's not as commonly seen, but maybe picking up in some usage in that Furret, because that Furret looks really neutral into every single Pokemon on Xmot's team.
Oh, good point. A lot of people, again, are forgetting about the normal type Pokemon. Maybe you'll see the Licky Licky occasionally. Furret is a Pokemon that was really successful in seasons past, but it has that grass type coverage. It does have the Sucker Punch and that normal typing hard walls, ghost types like Jellicent, like Galarian Corsola, so it could make an appearance here for sure. Alex, I gotta be honest, whenever I see Unova Stunfisk, I think of you, because in the grassroots draft formats we used to play in, you played a lot of Unova Stunfisk. Yeah,
and I think it's a great pick. Unfortunately, in this meta, because of all the Quagsire, it's going to be really tough to kind of navigate through some of those tougher matchups, especially because Xmot's Quagsire looks incredibly safe into GoLeagueGregg's team. Other than maybe the Altaria and the Trailblaze from the Furret, it's going to be really tough for GoLeagueGregg to actually find an answer. But we have our teams are locked in and we're ready to go.
Game #1, Xmot on the left side of your screen, GoLeagueGregg on the right, Galarian Corsola leading into Empoleon.
Yeah, and this is a pretty neutral matchup. You're going to see the Hydro Cannon getting thrown here after 7 Metal Sounds, because that is exactly the right type of timing, and it's going to do about half of Galarian Corsola's health.
A lot of trainers forget about Galarian Corsola and just how bulky it is. This is also a best buddy Galarian Corsola to swap out into Furret. Very interesting call, because your Furret is your hardest answer to the Galarian Corsola. Maybe GoLeagueGregg trying to catch Xmot by surprise, but he responds with the Wigglytuff.
Yeah, that Wigglytuff is really good into Furret because of the Sucker Punch damage being resisted into that Fairy typing of Wigglytuff, and the Swift is also neutral.
Gonna go for some charm damage. Wigglytuff builds up to the Icy Wind, maintaining good discipline on the turn cycles there, throwing 3 charms, but GoLeagueGregg is gonna fire off another Swift here before any debuffs, which is actually pretty good.
Yeah, and I think Xmot is happy to concede that damage because he understands that GoLeagueGregg's Empoleon is in the back and is just waiting to farm down the Wigglytuff.
This might not KO, and I think GoLeagueGregg believes in his Furret. Actually, it does pick up the KO, and that that gamble did not pay off there for the trainer on the right, but he is able to bring in the Empoleon into the Wigglytuff and get a solid farm down.
Yeah, and this is going to do some nice damage. It is resisted, but getting off any type of damage into that Empoleon is really nice. And we see a combo play immediately, throwing the Nightshade into that Empoleon. Do you shield? You have to.
You have to, right? Because it's GoLeagueGregg, your third Pokemon is the Annihilate,
right.
and that Corsola is just way too healthy for this matchup, so you have to get some value out of your Steel and Water type. The Hydro Cannon will command the shield, which is good news.
Yeah, and Xmod, I think, is in a really good position here because you can kind of just start to throw some damage off into this Empoleon, and now you're forced to shield again as GoLeagueGregg, unless you want to let it go.
It's going to be tough, right? If you bring in the Annihilate here, you're going to take a lot of Astonish damage. Down goes Empoleon. The final Pokemon for GoLeagueGregg is the Annihilate, and those low kicks are basically doing nothing to the Ghost-type Galarian Corsola.
Yeah, and I think even here, you could invest a shield if you really wanted to, but actually letting it go, letting the Quagsire be the Pokemon of choice here in the endgame to try to take down this Quagsire. It's not quite in range of an Aqua Tail, but I think after the Mud Shots, it might be.
At what point do you try to catch here as Xmod, right? Do you reach for that Wigglytuff? Because he did allow the Galarian Corsola to faint, which means his switch timer is fresh and ready to go. Shooting up this Rage Fist means that the next Rage Fist will hit even harder. We'll see what he decides to do.
Right, it might even be a close combat because that close combat is going to do twice as much damage as the Rage Fist. Here comes the Aqua Tail. It's not enough to knock out. Here we actually see another Aqua Tail getting thrown here. Obviously you have to shield here. Now it just comes down to, do you go for the close combat or do you go for the Rage Fist?
But here's the problem, right? If you throw the close combat as Greg and the Wigglytuff comes out, it's going to instantly KO you with the Charm. So we do see the third, I believe, Rage Fist up this sequence from GoLeagueGregg, but he's shaking his head. He doesn't think it's enough to pick up the KO, and it's not. Quagsire hangs on. One shot's coming through.
Gosh.
Annihilate is the last chance here. GoLeagueGregg gets the KO.
Oh my gosh, what an incredible battle. Look at that Annihilate. Just, we talked about it right before the battle. It's not even a Pokemon that has an incredible matchup into Xmod's team. And you saw the Wigglytuff, you saw the Quagsire, and you saw the Corsola. Where does Annihilate even go into that? It went into the Quagsire.
Yeah, I mean, I can't help but feel that Xmod kind of let that one slip through his hands a little bit there. Maybe the earlier shield. It's hard to say exactly where things went wrong, but like you said, the Annihilate didn't have any play on paper. Had a lot of disadvantageous matchups. Two of the hardest counters in the entire meta were on this same trio, and it still was able to come in there and pick up the win. So incredibly well done by GoLeagueGregg.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of my favorite things to happen is in a battle where you feel like, oh, there's no way out, there's no way out. And then GoLeagueGregg just maneuvering and finding the win condition and able to advance himself into the next game with a win instead of a loss.
Exactly. That Astonish damage was punishing, but once Galarian Corsola was out of the way and the Wigglytuff was weak, the Annihilate did the rest. Low kick comes in here. That damage applies on the 2-turn fast attack before the 3-turn charm, which means that it was able to connect, and that was every ounce of damage that GoLeagueGregg needed to pick up the KO. Going to battle number 2, what do you expect?
Well, I would say something like the Clefable could make a lot of sense on GoLeagueGregg's team to be able to do some neutral damage into a lot of Xmod's team. The only thing is the Xmod has 2 steel types, so maybe you have to avoid that, but that's where the Annihilate comes in, so maybe you just pair those 2 together because you have the Meteor Mash to be able to hit that Wigglytuff that we saw do some damage in game number 1. But here, we're actually jumping into game number 2. We have our leads. Here is that Clefable versus the Galarian Corsola. Oh my goodness, yeah, very neutral matchup, but I do think that GoLeagueGregg is happy to see the Galarian Corsola here in the lead as opposed to against his Annihilate or his Empoleon in the back. Gonna go for the Meteor Mash here on proper timing. Let's see how much damage this does. Yeah, Meteor Mash is one of my favorite moves because it does so much damage and not a lot of Pokemon can get it, and it does basically just as much as that that Hydro Cannon did in game 1. Correct, yeah. Looks like a Nightshade will come through here. Both trainers kind of eyeballing the energy. This is not a matchup I'm super familiar with, but I do think they are feeling their way through it. That Nightshade did not do enough to pick up the KO, and I think that the Meteor Mash will not do enough either, so it's really going to come down to the wire. Yeah, and I think you kind of have to, neuter this Clefable with that Corsola because it is such an impressive, Clefable is such an impressive Pokemon into that backline with that Altaria back there. So you really want to avoid that Fairy type. GoLeagueGregg wants control of switch advantage, uses his first shield of the battle, looks for the Fairy Wind down, and he is able to get it off of just 2 Fairy Winds because he was able to get the 3rd Fairy Wind off of the double Astonishes that we saw Xmod execute. Now, what does he come in with? Yeah, and what do you do if you're GoLeagueGregg? Do you just go for the Meteor Mash? He does. I believe he could have gotten to the to Moonblast, but it's so hard because the Empoleon could have come in there and knocked you out. So you kind of just have to get the damage off as soon as you can. But here we're going to see Quagsire get a lot of energy. Yeah,
that's a lot of energy. Meteor Mash being resisted by the Quagsire, but the Annihilate comes in. This is actually great news for the Annihilate. It gets a neutral target here, not that hard road that it had to fight through in game number 1. Aqua Tail will connect. We saw how much damage this did in game number 1. Takes about, I'd say, 35% or so. Oh, with a catch of the Rage Fist.
Really, really nice catch on the Altaria. This is still neutral damage, but Altaria is a lot bulkier than that Shadow Quagsire.
At this point, GoLeagueGregg can bring in the Empoleon here. He does have the steel typing, but remember, Altaria does have access to the Flamethrower, which will pile on a ton of damage. And I don't think that this Altaria is anywhere close to Dropek range.
Yeah, and that's why I think just letting it go. Xmont understands the Altaria is in a really good position here with the shield advantage and getting off this Flamethrower here. You don't even shield a Flamethrower. Now, this is going to do some nice neutral damage, about 50% of what Empoleon has left.
I wonder if we envision our win conditions here. Do you think that Xmont allows this next Dropek through, looks for a mud shot down of the Empoleon, and then tries to double Aqua Tail the Annihilate? Is that the win con?
I kind of like that. I kind of like that. But actually, we actually see a shield come up here. Maybe going for the mud shot down anyway, but you will have to shield here. Actually, look at this charge attack priority. Now you really have to shield this Quagsire because it's really tough to get through the rest of this Empoleon otherwise.
Exactly. I do believe that was a charge attack party. This is a lot of energy down the drain. No pun intended, because it's a water type attack. And Xmont leans back in his chair. He did not want to do that. Sometimes you get the instant swap. Sometimes you get the one-turn swap. I think Xmont thought that was a one-turn switch, but it was instantaneous because the Dragon Whip damage had resolved.
Yeah, and now it's really tough because this Rage Fist is going to knock out. Altaria is, I think, a little bit too low to try to come back into this game, and it's going to be really tough. You've got to get to 2 moves, and unfortunately, that shield that GoLeagueGregg never used is going to come back to bite Xmont here.
Yeah, exactly. That shield in the back pocket is not even going to get used here as GoLeagueGregg is able to weather a tough matchup in game number 1, and then game number 2 tie things up nicely with a bow. That's your winner semis for Group D.
That was really, really well played by GoLeagueGregg. I think the Annihilate was probably the MVP of the show, or the star of the show there, because we don't really see it that often, but it came into both games, and it was able to take both games in the end.
I mean, Annihilate is totally changed when it is running the low kick because it paces so much more quickly. You're not getting that hard-hitting counter damage, so it's harder to farm things down, but you can rely on those charge attacks. I think it opens up the close combat as a potential asset for that Pokemon, whereas prior to this, you might see Primeape with close combat because it has a Karate Chop, and Annihilate was strictly Ice Punch, at least in the Championship Series. So seeing that variability, that change-up, is actually really cool and really exciting.
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite things is when a Pokemon has a different kind of niche, right? A different play style. Before, it was all fast, do a lot of damage, but now it's more finesse, right? The charge attacks. And here we see the Clefable, another Pokemon that we don't see very often, come out and do really, really well for GoLeagueGregg in that lead matchup. And then obviously we see the Annihilate rage fisting, getting so angry at the Altaria.
Yeah, of course. And you called it out so well, right? In that, especially that battle number 1, running into a Galarian Corsola and a Wigglytuff team, GoLeagueGregg did absolute magic on stage to get that Annihilate into a competitive position. But game number 2, he just gathered so much momentum towards the second half of the battle, and I really feel like Xmont had maybe 2 or 3 different win conditions and kind of flirted with each one, but didn't like commit, right? And I think that in the end kind of destabilized his win conditions and ultimately caused him to fizzle out.
Yeah, and that happens. Like, I mean, that's the thing about these tournaments. They're very high stakes, very fast paced. So you gotta really understand what's my win condition, and you kind of aim for one of the many that come in to play. So I'm really happy that we were able to see GoLeagueGregg take that.
If I can quote one of our old mutual friends here, Wild Susan Boyle, says when the battle begins, there are limitless win conditions, but as the battle progresses, they all narrow down, and eventually you have to pick one, commit to it, maybe have a backup plan if you have that flexibility, but otherwise, gotta hammer it home. Incredible series there. GoLeagueGregg advances to, I believe, our winners finals in Group D, which is really, really exciting. But we have so many other groups and so many other trainers that are just revving their engines and ready to go. We're going to get Zimikid on stage pretty soon.
Oh, he's one of my favorites because he always brings something a little bit different, right? He was famous for bringing Surfetch.
Yeah.
He's brought a lot of wild spice. I believe he also just competed in Seattle, so we'll see how he plays and how he takes that momentum from Seattle's finish to this tournament as well.
I gotta be honest, Alex, I really want to know the secrets behind this Annihilate gameplay. Is low kick the tech here this weekend in Houston? Let's head down to the stage and have DeFi talk with GoLeagueGregg.
Thank you so much, Will. That is exactly the question that I have as well. I'm here with Greg. Tell me about the low kick Annihilate. Is that the tech for the weekend?
Absolutely. Low kick Annihilate this weekend is going to be massive. That update from this season is really bringing it back into the forefront, especially the non-shadow version. If you can get Annihilate just ramped up and going with, a couple extra shields, there's nothing stopping it.
And I noticed that this is your first season playing in the Championship Series, just now in 2026. But people might know you from streaming, from doing other things prior. Why start the Championship Series now?
Truth be told, I really didn't know about it. I didn't look into it. I played very casually, and then I started streaming as a way to allow myself to play more often, to kind of make an excuse as opposed to getting bogged down with work. And then it really took off from the stream, and people were like, you should go to these events, and here we are now.
And what would you recommend to trainers who are maybe thinking about attending their first Championship Series event?
Go. Absolutely go. Doesn't matter how you do in the main event, the side events. If you go and get around the environment and just start to participate, you're going to have a fantastic time.
And I think that is great advice to all trainers out there. Now, I know you've got a big community behind you. Is there anyone you want to shout out before I let you get back to the tournament?
Absolutely. I want to shout out just anyone that's part of the Go Lounge, our Discord server. Obviously, Overlord Raikou, Crispy, and Spellbringer, the four of us are the ones really making that run. And then all my great friends who are here today. There's so many people I want to shout out, but just everybody.
We love when trainers have a big community behind them, but we have a big tournament to get back to. Speediest Chief, house start. Go ahead and take it away.
All right, thank you so much, DeFi and GoLeagueGregg. I love seeing people that are a huge part of the community and inspiring other trainers to do more regional events, to come out to these, because this is really where the magic happens.
I really like the confidence, too. As soon as DeFi asked about the Annihilate, he said that's absolutely the tech this weekend, and I think you have to be certain of your team and your plays if you are going to take it the distance here in Houston.